Hi, I'm Izzy, and this is Dizzy Quilts and Sews. Today is my stop on the vlogger tour for hashtag a gift to November. And I'll have a mug rug tutorial for you so that maybe you'll be inspired to make some as gifts for Christmas or whatever holiday you celebrate. A little bit about the challenge before we jump right into the tutorial. So the hashtag A Gift to November is hosted by Adam from Adam Sews and Allison from Sew Like Dottie on YouTube and on Instagram. And the gist of it is basically to inspire or encourage you to get started sewing gifts for the holidays before December 24th. I know as makers, we tend to get very ambitious with the gifts we want to make and are stuck basically frantically sewing the day before Christmas, trying to get everything done and wrapped up. So this challenge is giving you the nudge to get started early so that you can be finished early. What you have to do to win a prize, because there will be lots and lots of prizes, is to sew a gift and post a picture of your gift on Instagram using the hashtag A Gift to November and tagging Adam or Allison or both. So I'm going to put all of the details as well as a link to Adam and Allison's channels down in the description box. Now, I will be making a few gifts for the holidays, mainly for family. I have a bit of a tradition where I make something for all of the ladies in my life every year. So my sister, my mom, my stepmom, my sister-in-law, as well as my daughters and daughters-in-law. So typically, though, they all get pretty much the same thing. So instead of giving you a list of potential gift ideas, I thought I would show you how to make a gift that comes together super, super quickly, that you can offer your loved ones or a colleague or a friend. And yeah, like super, super easy. So what we're making is a mug rug, and what we're making is this mug rug. So a modern holiday inspired mug rug to offer. You can add a beautiful mug with this, a pouch of hot chocolate with marshmallows, or a fancy tea. So anything would go well with this. Now, I love mug rugs. I have a bunch of them around the house. A couple of years ago, I made a bunch of little improv ones in all of the rainbows, the rainbow colors. And this was actually for a guild exchange that we had for the holidays. I also like to have seasonal, oh, hello, Bear. I also like to have seasonal mug rugs. So I made this one for fall, which I love, and I'm still using on my desk here in my home office. So this is one, and actually I have a tutorial on my blog, which I've not maintained in a long time, but there's a tutorial on my blog, which I'll link below if you want to make one of these. So that is what a mug rug is all about. Now, let's move over to the cutting table so we can walk you through the tutorial on how to make one of these. All right, so here are the fabrics I'll be using to make, or that I use to make my mug rug. So what you'll need first is fabric for the tree. Now, I used a greenish fabric I had in my stash for a long time, and you'll see there are cute little butterfly designs that, in my eye at least, look like garland, which is really cool. So when I cut my triangle, I try to get as much as I can of the butterflies, and you'll see here in the finished garland, in the finished mug rug, it looks like the tree has decorations in it, which I thought was really cute. So that's the fabric I'm using for the tree, and you'll need to cut a 4-inch square of your tree fabric. Next, you need a tiny little piece of fabric for the tree trunk. I'm using dark gray, but you can use brown, you can use black. Any little scrap you have will do. You'll need a 1-inch square. And then for the background, I'm using this pink fabric that has like stars and moons that I thought would make the perfect background and make it look as though my Christmas tree is outside with that beautiful fabric. And then finally, you'll need a backing fabric. Now I'm using this gray Robert Kaufman Kona cotton that looks again like little Christmas lights or little garlands. So I thought that was the perfect little backing. You'll need to cut your backing into a piece of about 8 inches by 7 inches or 8 inches square. The finished mug rug is about 6 inches high by 7 wide. Now it may vary a tiny little bit depending on the quilting and how you square this up at the end. But yeah, 6 by 7 is about the size. So a backing of 8 by 8 will be perfect. Now for your background pieces, you're going to need to make a few of these. And I'm going to put all of the dimensions you'll need down below in the description box, so you can have a look at that and then get cutting. You're also going to need a piece for your binding. You'll see in my finished mug rug, I use the same fabric as my background. You can definitely do that. Or any fabric that will frame your mug rug is going to be just fine. And you need a piece that's 2.5 inch wide by about 30 inches long. All right, so go to the description box, pull up all of your measurements, and then cut all your pieces, and I'll meet you back here when we're done. All right, so I've got all of my fabric cut. So I've got a 4-inch square, which will be my tree, and actually it's going to go in this direction so that I catch as much as of the butterflies as I can. I've got a small square, which I'll cut to 1 inch in a bit for my tree trunk. I've got all of my background pieces. And again, this is a little bit improv, a little bit precise cutting or precise sewing. So my pieces are a little bit bigger, but I can trim them down when I need to, which is not a big problem. So this is all my background pieces. I've got my backing, and I've got 2 strips of my background fabric for my binding. So I've cut these at 2.5 inch wide, and they're about 16 inches long. So I'm going to sew these together to make my binding later when I'm ready to get that sewn. So hopefully you've got all of your pieces cut and ready to go so that we can start putting our little mug rug together. All right, so the first thing we need to do is cut our tree fabric. And again, this is a bit of an improv part. You really don't need to be precise. The only thing is the base of your tree should be at least 3 inches, and the height of your tree should be at least 3 inches. And we're going to trim that later. So again, don't be super picky. Just put your ruler and slice. And then I'm going to put this on my grid here and make sure that I've got at least 3 inches and go like this. So I've got my little tree here. Again, you don't need to be precise. We're not looking for perfection here, but I like where my little garlands have ended. I'm going to have lots of decorations on my tree, which is perfect. All right, I forgot to mention this piece of fabric before, but you should have a biggish square of your background fabric, which is about 6 by 6. Mine is a little bit smaller than that, but that's fine. It's going to work just as well. And what you're going to do with this fabric is basically cut it in half diagonally. Again, you don't need to be super precise here. Just cut your square or rectangle in half so that you have two triangles like this. And what we're going to do is you're going to piece your triangle like this on both long sides of your Christmas tree. So place your background triangle about in the middle. So your tree is in the middle of this. And sew at 1/4 inch. You're then going to press this back and then take your other one and do the same thing, piecing it to the other side and then pressing it. So you're going to end up with a nice Christmas tree with the background around it. All right, so I've sewn the first piece here and pressed nice and flat. So now I'm going to attach the second triangle to this side, but before I do that, I want to trim this to reduce the bulk. So I'm just going to put my ruler even with the tree and just take this extra little bit off. So now I can take my second triangle, put it right sides together and stitch at 1/4 inch. All right, so I've got my second side sewn on. And now what we need to do is trim this so it is in a rectangle shape. So what we want to get to is a rectangle that is 3 inches high by 5 inches wide, or as close as possible to that. So the first thing we're going to do is trim the bottom of the tree, because we want the bottom of the tree to be the bottom of our rectangle, because we're going to be attaching the tree trunk over here. So I'm just going to trim this off right here. And then I want to make sure that the height is at least 3 inches. So I'm going to turn this way and then measure 3 inches from the bottom. All right. And trim that off. There we go. And now we want to make sure that this is 5 inches. So I'm going to go over here and go as far as I can. So trim right here. And then turn this around and measure 5 inches from this side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is this going to be in the middle? Yeah, you might want to play with this because I like my tree to be just about in the middle of my 5 inches. So I think it's going to look really good right there. So I'm going to trim the right side right there and turn it around again and measure about 5 inches. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, that should look pretty good. There you go. So now I have a rectangle for my little Christmas tree. So next up, I need to attach the trunk to this. But before, I need to piece my trunk with the background fabric. So you should have a 1 inch square little tree trunk plus 2 strips of background fabric that are about 1 inch by 3-ish inches. We're going to trim all of that later, so no biggie if you're not absolutely precise here. So you're going to sew your tree trunk between your 2 strips like this, right sides together, 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, so here's my little tree trunk with my background fabric. Now what you want to do is place your trunk wherever you want it against your tree. Could be here, could be here, could be anywhere. I like mine sort of kind of in the middle. So I'm now going to sew this to my tree rectangle, right sides together. And if you want, just to make sure your tree trunk doesn't move, you can pin this here and then sew everything at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, so there we go. I've got my trunk attached to my tree. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim the extra fabric here because we don't want that inside our little mug rug. So we're going to trim that. And then trim this over here so that we are left with a little Christmas tree block. All right, so you're gonna now sew your 3 by 3.5 piece of background to the left side of your tree. So just like this, again, right sides together at 1/4 inch, and then pressing the seam to one side or open, that's up to you. All right, there we go, that's done. And then the last step to finishing our little mug rug is to attach the 2-inch strips to the top and bottom of your little mug rug. You'll see that I cut mine way oversized, and that's on purpose because that way I don't need to be ultra precise and I can just cut the excess at the ends. So I'm going to sew the top right sides together at 1/4 inch and then press this to the side, and then do the same thing to the bottom, 1/4 inch, and then press it, and then I'll come back here when that's done. All right, so here are my borders all sewn on. So what is left to do is basically trim this so that I'm left with a nice rectangle. And there you go. Here's our little mug rug top, all finished. Next, we're going to be putting our little sandwich together. All right, so what we need for our sandwich is our backing. So remember, I chose this fabric for my backing. So this backing needs to be right side down. Next, you'll need a piece of batting. That's about the same size as your backing. You'll see mine's a little bit smaller, but no biggie. And then our little mug rug top, right side up. So again, you've got your backing, which is right side down, a piece of batting that's bigger than your top and about the same size as your backing. And then you've got your little top centered on top of your sandwich. There is bare little hair everywhere in this room. All right, so now we are ready for quilting. Now, if this were a big quilt, I would strongly encourage you to pin your 3 layers together or hand base them together so that they don't move. But this is so small, and I'm going to keep my quilting really, really simple. So if you remember, just let me get the one that's done. The quilting on the one I made is just horizontal wavy lines that kind of reminded me of like wind. And so it looks like our little tree is caught in like a little snowstorm or a windstorm, which I thought was kind of cool and is really, really, really easy to do. So I'm going to do the exact same thing on my little quilt here, so I don't feel the need to pin or baste anything. Like, it's not going to go anywhere. And with the walking foot, everything is going to get fed through evenly, basically. So let's go over to the sewing machine and get our quilting done. All right, so I'm ready for quilting. And what I've done is I put my walking foot on my sewing machine. That way, that'll ensure that all 3 layers of my quilt sandwich are going to get fed through the machine at the same rate, nice and evenly. I'm also putting my stitch length at a 3, which is a tiny bit longer than what I use typically for piecing, just because I like the look of the stitches at a 3. And what I'm going to do is, starting on one side, I'm just going to stitch slightly wavy lines across the whole mini quilt. And again, this is a walking foot, so go slow. It's not made for running. So yeah, I start in about the middle. And because this is a very small quilt, I'm going to turn my quilt for every line. And that makes sure that there's not a lot of distortion, which can happen sometimes with stitching lines on a quilt. So, all right, I'm starting in the batting. That way I don't need to bury any threads. And here we go. Now what I'm doing is I'm slightly moving my hands to stitch the waves, but very little movement here. I don't want this to be crazy wavy. So here's our first line of stitching. You'll see that it's just slightly wavy, not a whole lot. And now I went in this direction, so I'm going to turn it and stitch my second line. And I'm going to do these, oh, I don't know, about 3/4 of an inch apart. I don't want this quilted too densely. All right, let's turn this around again. All right, all done. Look how quick that was. And I've got nice wavy lines that are a little bit reminiscent of wind and a little bit of a snowstorm because of the light gray, almost white stitches. So I'm really loving the look of this. Now next, we're gonna trim or square up our little mug rug and get it ready for binding. All right, so before I can attach my binding, obviously I need to trim the extra batting and backing that I've got on all 4 sides. So, and this is called usually squaring up. So I'm just gonna, try to get as square or 90-degree angles at the corners as I can without, being super. All right, and you'll see that the quilting created a little bit of drag here, so I've got extra fabric on this side. That's okay, I'm just gonna trim that off. All right, now I'm gonna try to be pretty good about lining the squared off side to one of my lines on the ruler so that I have as much as 90-degree angle as I can. And then do the same thing with the other side. There we go, all squared up. And, oops, there we go. Turns out this measures about 6 1/4 by 7 1/2, which is a nice size for a mug rug. You have more than enough room for a mug with coffee that is cold by now, and a little treat. So a cookie or 2, chocolate, whatever your little heart desires. So the last step is to basically put our binding on this little mini quilt, and that's also going to be super quick because this is very small. So I'm going to prep my binding and then come back here to sew it on with you guys. All right, so I've got my binding all ready. So I took my strips of 2.5 inch wide fabric, folded it in half and pressed it. And now I'm gonna line up the binding with the raw edges the raw edges of the binding with the raw edges of my little quilt top. I'm lining the top of the binding to the top of the mug rug, but I know I'm going to be cutting a little bit of extra off here. And I'm going to start stitching almost at the other end, like right before the corner. So I want to leave a nice tail unattached so that I can basically attach it to the, when I come around. So you'll see this when that's all done. So stitch almost to the corner, so to the 1/4 inch before the corner. So you're going to stitch all the way here and then stitch off the quilt at a 45-degree angle, and then take the quilt off your machine so that you can fold at the corner. So again, start about here, stitch to a 1/4 inch before the end, and then veer off in a 45-degree angle. Now my stitch length, I still have my walking foot on, but my stitch length is back down to 2.5 so that my binding can be nice and secure. So I'm going to stitch, and I'm going to put a pin. All right, so I'm going to put a pin at a 1/4 inch before the end, just to remind myself that I need to stop there. And I'm going to stitch all the way to the pin, but not past it. And take it out. And then move my little quilt so that it's at 45 degrees, and then stitch right off. So if you can see this, hopefully you can, I stitched right off the corner at 45 degrees. And now what I'm going to do is take my binding and fold it to the right, finger press it a little bit, and then fold it completely to the left so that it's even with the raw edges of the quilt. All right, so I've got a nice fold here at the corner, and I'm going to pin this down so it doesn't go anywhere. And now I'm going to start stitching on the other side by putting the folded edge here that I just created with my binding under the needle, and then stitch at a 1/4 inch still all the way down the other side, again stopping at a 1/4 inch and veering off. And I'm going to do this for all corners. Now I like to back stitch when I start here, just to make sure that my binding is nice and secure at the corners. All right, I'm getting near the end, so I'm going to put my pin at about a 1/4 inch and stitch right up to it, but not over it. Turn to a 45-degree angle and stitch right off. And then again, I'm going to take my binding, fold it to the right, finger press the angle here, then fold it to the left, making sure I've got a nice fold even with the raw edges of my quilt, and place a pin right here just to hold everything together, and then start stitching again where I have my fold in the binding. All right, getting to the end again. I'm going to put my little pin at a 1/4 inch and then stitch right up to it. Take it out, turn to 45 degrees, and stitch off. All right, again, we're going to fold to the right, finger pressing at a 45-degree angle, fold to the left, making sure I've got a nice fold, even with the raw edges. Pin this in place, make sure it doesn't move. And then start stitching on this side. Now make sure your tail from the beginning is out of the way when you get to the last corner. I'm going to put my pin at 1/4 inch. All right, now I'm at the last corner, so I'm going to do like I did for the other 3. So to the right and then to the left, making sure I've got a nice fold, even with the raw edges. I'm going to put my pin. And I'm going to start sewing on that last side, but really only do about 1 inch or 2. So don't go very far. If you go too far, you're going to have a really hard time stitching your 2 ends together. So I've got nice tails now at both ends. So what I'm going to do now is make sure that I've got a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I'm going to cut, where are my scissors? Oh, I'll be right back. All right, so I'm going to cut the tail from the very beginning to about half the width of the little quilt. So about here, just you can get rid of this. And now for the other tail, I'm going to overlap them and make sure they overlap by about 1/4 inch because that's our seam allowance here. So just to be sure, if you want to be super safe, use a ruler. So there we go, like here. And now I'm going to make sure that my second tail overlaps by about 1/4 inch and cut that off. And now what we're going to do, and you can take the pins out at this point if you don't want to poke yourself. What we're now going to do is make sure that our ends are right sides together. And this is going to be, I'm warning you right now, very fiddly. So right sides together, as even as you can make them. Put a pin or 2 or 3. Telling you, this is going to be very fiddly. But you can do it. So pinning my ends together. All right, so hopefully now you can see that my ends are pinned together here. Wow, I've got a crooked pin right here. Now I'm going to try to stuff this under the needle. It helps if you're able to kind of hold this together. I'm going to grab my clips here. So just grab one of those quilter's clips, or there you go. I can hold this together now and try and stick this under the needle and stitch at 1/4 inch seam allowance. There you go. All right, this looks pretty good. I can take my clip out, open this up, and you can finger press the seam allowance here. And make sure it's open just to reduce the bulk a little bit. And then fold it back together. And it should be the exact size that you need to finish off that last side. So put your quilt back under the needle, start stitching where you ended, back stitch, and then making sure everything's aligned, stitch so that you meet the stitches you did at the beginning, making sure your fold here, your corner is out of the way. There you go. Awesome. So now I can trim this off. Try and trim your threads as you go. That's way it's a lot cleaner. Now I can take all those pins off that were holding my corners and basically turn the binding to the back, making sure I push the corners out as much as I can. There we go, because now we're going to stitch it onto the back, but from the front for a nice clean finish on the front. This is where wonder clips come in really, really handy, and you can use these clips to attach your binding to the back. And because we're going to be stitching from the front, I like to put the flat side of the clip towards the back or on the back. Now for the corners, just make sure that you fold it and get a nice corner on the back, and then put a clip right there to keep it in place. All right, put as many or as little clips as you feel you need, especially near the corners, just to keep your fabric nice and neat. All right, almost done here. A couple more. And if you've got some threads, like obviously quilting cotton, frays, so just tuck them in here, and the binding's gonna hide them all away. All right, so I've got my binding all clipped, ready to go. So now I'm gonna turn this around and start stitching in the ditch on the front side of our mug rug. So, and you can put your stitch length at a 3 again to do this part. So just remove one of your clips to make sure you've got enough room to get your walking foot on here. Put your needle down as close to the binding as possible, but into the quilt. And this will ensure very nice stitch in the ditch on the front side. You'll barely be able to see this stitching. And then go slow, removing your clips as you go, stitching as close to the binding as possible, but into the quilt. And when you get to the corner, go really slow and make sure that you stop in your needle down position right at the corner. And turn, and then keep going as close to the binding as you can. All right, I'm slowing right down, stopping at the corner, turn, and then keep going. All right, so I'm on to the last side now. So I'm gonna go past my first few stitches just to secure everything, and then do 1 or 2 back stitches and then cut my thread. Okay. Bear, I need you to stay there, my love. There we go. All right, then trim your threads. And there we go. You have a finished little mug rug. And there we go, a cute little mug rug to offer as a gift for the holidays. Here is my little finished mug rug. What you can do too, if you enjoy embroidery, is you could embroider a little star at the top or something. Mine ended up with a flat top, which is not a big deal really. But yeah, I love my little mug rug. Now, if you're looking for other ideas for gifts, please use the hashtag here on YouTube and go watch some of the other videos that have been published all month long. There are some fabulous ideas out there. Also, I have a co-vlogger today, so go check out Christine Sews a Lot, who is putting a video today as well. Go check her out and see what she's up to. Thanks so much for stopping by. Hopefully you enjoyed my little tutorial. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks a bunch, and I will see you soon.